Hey y'all, this is a Variety Kid. OnePlus has released 4T phones, with upgrades at like the halfway point that aren't as big as the major upgrades with their flagship phone in quarter two of a year. But but however, each of these have been of different sizes, in terms of their upgrades. So in this video, I'm gonna say, in my opinion, which one, the upgrades from best to worst, or from biggest to least. Okay, so 2018 was the biggest. It had, so the main things that were upgraded on the OnePlus 6T compared to the OnePlus 6 were it had a bigger display at 6.41 inches compared to 6.28 inches, and this is relatively minor, but it had a taller aspect ratio at 19.5 by 9 compared to 19 by 9. It had a smaller bezels and a smaller notch, which they called the teardrop notch. And I feel like a lot of y'all know this, but I just want to say this. The notch on the OnePlus 6 wasn't as bad, wasn't too bad, but however, however, on the 6T, they did make it much smaller. It had, on the front, not the back was still Gorilla Glass 5, but the front got upgraded to Gorilla Glass 6. There was this feature called Smart Boost, which was a software feature that uses AI apparently, or something like that, to launch your most used apps faster. It started at 128 gigabytes of storage compared to 64 gigabytes of storage. And actually it was at a price that was let me check. And actually, it started at it started at 128 gigabytes for only $20 more than the 128 gigabyte OnePlus 6. So, yeah, you got more, entry-level storage. It had an in-display fingerprint scanner instead of a fingerprint scanner on the back. And it had, a bigger battery at 3,700 milliamps compared to 3,300 milliamps. And then there's two on this special McLaren edition, only. There was a version with 10 gigabytes of RAM, and there was a version with 30-watt wireless charging compared to the 20-watt wireless charging. Next, the second biggest was 2019, which I would have rated it as biggest, but as y'all probably know, there was a OnePlus 7 Pro, which was more popular than the OnePlus 7, because it was, because the OnePlus 7 wasn't sold in the US, and a lot of the new features were, and while some stuff got upgraded, there were many things about the upgraded stuff that the OnePlus 7T that the OnePlus 7T was still better at or the same as. Okay, so in the OnePlus 7T, there was the Snapdragon 855 Plus compared to the Snapdragon 855 with a higher clock speed at 2.96 compared to 2.84 gigahertz. The 128 gigabyte model had 8 gigabytes of RAM instead of 6 gigabytes of RAM. So that meant that they had officially gotten rid of 6 gigabytes of RAM. It got 960 frames per second slow motion video, and it got 30T wireless charging or 30 watt, which the 7 Pro had, but they called it 30T wireless charging compared to 20 watt wireless charging. So the OnePlus 7 didn't have the fast charging that the OnePlus 6T McLaren had. But the fast charging would be able to get you like roughly a 70% charge in 30 minutes. And there was a macro mode, which apparently like allowed you to take better close-up shots, or something. Oh yeah, and I also forgot about this one. There's so the improvement of the ultrasonic fingerprint scanner wasn't as big from the 7 to the 6T, but however, the ultrasonic fingerprint scanner worked a little bit faster and was a little bit more secure. No, wait, actually it was an optical fingerprint scanner. Now we're going to talk about the things that were already available on the OnePlus 7 Pro. It had a 6.55-inch screen compared to a 6.41-inch screen, which the OnePlus 7 Pro had an even bigger 6.67-inch screen. It had smaller bezels and a 32% smaller notch, which the OnePlus 7 Pro had even smaller bezels than the 7T, and it had no notch at all. It had a pop-up camera instead. There was HDR10 Plus compared to HDR10, which the OnePlus 7 Pro already had. It had a 90 Hz screen compared to a 60 Hz screen, which gave it the term Fluid AMOLED like the 7 Pro had. It had a f1.6 aperture compared to an f1.7 aperture, which the OnePlus 7 Pro had a 1.6 aperture on the main camera. And then it got a wide-angle camera and a telephoto camera. So the 6T had a depth camera, which is basically a not as good telephoto camera. It's really only used for portrait photos. And in some ways, the 7 Pro's telephoto camera was better, while in other ways, the 7T's telephoto camera was better. The 7T had a telephoto camera, had more megapixels at, let me check, had more megapixels at 12 megapixels compared to 8 megapixels, and had a better f-stop at f2.2 compared to f2.4, but the OnePlus 7 Pro had 3x optical zoom instead of 1.99x optical zoom, and the telephoto camera had OIS. Now, this is just my personal opinion. I actually feel like I would prefer overall the telephoto camera on the OnePlus 7 Pro, so for me, it wasn't better than the telephoto camera on the OnePlus 7 Pro. And the wide-angle lens, which will be upgraded in the future with a software update, as it will get 4K video recording on the wide angle. And then there was a 3800 milliamp hour battery compared to a 3700 milliamp hour battery, whereas the OnePlus 7 Pro had an even bigger 4000 milliamp hour battery. Next came 2016, or in second last, where there was a Snapdragon 821 compared to a Snapdragon 820 with a higher clock speed. There was 128 gigabytes of storage, or it came in 64 and 128 compared to just 64 on the OnePlus 3. There was a 16 megapixel versus an 8 megapixel front camera, and there was a 3,400 milliamp hour battery compared to a 3,000 milliamp hour battery. And lastly came 2017. This one was pretty minor. I was totally expecting more before the rumors were announced shortly before the phone was announced, but there was only a but with the OnePlus 5T there came a 6.01 inch compared to a 5.5 inch screen. It had much smaller bezels, and actually the phone was only a little bit bigger. It had a brighter display, and the display also was able to work better in sunlight. And it had the return of Face Unlock, which the OnePlus 5 didn't have, whereas the OnePlus 3 and 3T had. So the 5T returned Face Unlock. Anyways, let's talk about the smallest upgrade. I was gonna say another thing about it is the 2017 upgrade didn't even have a bigger battery, so it had a bigger screen with the same battery size, which at least in theory would mean that it would have worse battery life. I was gonna say that it wasn't really too bad that OnePlus didn't release a phone with a better processor in 2017 and 2018. I mean, technically the 6T was faster due to the Smart Boost and a version with 10 gigabytes of RAM. But it wasn't too big of a deal because from my understanding, Qualcomm didn't release a chip for smartphones in late 2017 and late 2018 like they did in 2016 and 2019. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to leave a like if you did, and have a nice day. Bye.